The Trump administration bracing tonight for the deadline tomorrow to release the Epstein files. The date weighs heavily on Donald Trump and the Bondi Justice Department. They have known this was coming. You can imagine it's circled on their calendars as well. And they've known since Trump lost his bid to stop Congress from making the Epstein document release law, meaning it's not up to them anymore. This week, meanwhile, has featured more Epstein pressure on Trump, his top aide, saying he's in the files while trying to downplay his actual potential links to any Epstein crimes. Trump's number two at the FBI announcing that he is leaving and announcing that right before tomorrow's deadline. Notable timing for an official who claimed he would get the files released, but did not. A new investigative report today has come out on about how Epstein and Trump bonded over the pursuit of women. More on that in a moment. Congress also keeping the pressure up on the Trump DOJ by releasing new Epstein evidence today, which follows on what it had done last week. They have been parceling this out. And Congress is stressing that they have a bipartisan push to make Trump comply, with a range of warnings about consequences if they don't, from taking Bondi to court, which could drag this story and this Trump debacle well into next year, to even considering impeaching Trump if they defy the law and compliance tomorrow. That would be over any illegal refusal to follow this law that he literally signed.
It would be shocking if now they don't comply. Impeachment is possible depending on how egregious it is for Bondi. I mean, Susan Wiles has already said she whiffed and made a mess of it. We would explore the inherent power of contempt that Congress has. But there also is the strong possibility of prosecution for obstruction of justice.
You heard it there. Contempt, obstruction of justice, which you can get in trouble for, and, of course, possible impeachment. The point isn't which door they will open and when, but that they are already, in contrast to how Democrats sometimes sound, they're already planning for everything and planning for what would be the worst. If the president refuses to follow a law he just signed, they will go at everyone. And those different roads also matter, and we can discuss this more if it happens tomorrow, if they aren't turning over the required documents. But it matters because while the president is famously immune from later criminal sanction for official acts by the Supreme Court, his aides are not. People who work at the DOJ are not. Whether people are leaving, as I mentioned, related to this or other things, only time will tell. But if you stay and break the law while at the DOJ, it can end more than your career. It could end even your freedom. Then there's the new explosive report I mentioned from The Times, which probes Trump's relationship with Epstein, a, quote, best friend, and how they bonded over the pursuit of women. This new account draws on receipts and evidence from that era, just as Trump's birthday card for Epstein, which referenced secrets in women, was contemporaneous. It's credible evidence from at the time, which is part of why that birthday card story was a big deal. Trump suing the Journal over that reporting, and they're pushing back and saying they expect to be vindicated in court. Well, I mentioned that evidence, which matters, because today's new article has more evidence, like handwritten notes from all the way back to 1994 kept by Epstein's assistant, which the Times corroborated. The assistant noting at the time Trump was a regular presence in Epstein's life. Another employee noting the two talked at least 3 times a week in that period of their friendship of the mid and late 90s. That's a lot of contact. It adds to the questions about Trump's contradictions and secrecy about what he knew and when he knew it with all this information coming out. Interviews and public records have reinforced how the two men socialized. Some of that, of course, was known well before this article. The assistant indicating Trump seemed to enjoy regaling Epstein with tales of his sexual exploits. Epstein seemed to delight in how uncomfortable it made his assistant to overhear them or have to hear them if that was part of the job. Another Epstein employee said, quote, Trump would occasionally send over modeling cards for Epstein to peruse like a menu, raising questions about who knew what was the intention with those so-called cards. Now, the article has accounts of Epstein arranging for underage models to come socialize with adults, mentions parties where they were illegally offered alcohol. Epstein himself was not seen as a drinker, and the report in the Times does not accuse Trump of involvement in Epstein's crimes. It also notes that the women quoted in the new article did not accuse Trump of unlawful actions. And that's important to know. You have to look at all the facts, reporting, and allegations. And in a period of major allegations, some proven against Epstein, the fact that the Times talked to people who did not accuse Trump is relevant if you want the whole context of that story. That is the reporting that refers to some of the women, as well as perhaps underage women, that were in Epstein's circle or recruited for it at the time. But while that's the Times article, we can also note in context other women have accused Trump of improper conduct, including E. Jean Carroll, who won 2 civil judgments, ultimately over $80 million, upheld by an appeals court. I can tell you the United States Supreme Court is currently considering whether to hear that appeal, which would be Trump's last chance to potentially change or interfere with it. But as of this hour, under our courts of law, including the appeals court, they found Carroll to be the winner. And there are other accounts that you've probably heard of regarding allegations against Donald Trump. So you have the allegations and questions swirling over all of this. Some remain about Trump personally, but we can go well beyond his own personal liability in the Trump-Epstein relationship, which you see here. There's the broader case timeline, and the documents due tomorrow can shine light on Epstein's long history evading justice, which we've been charting. So that could implicate Donald Trump not only with what he did or didn't do in the 90s, and whether it's embarrassing or not or worse, but what he has done recently overseeing his DOJ and cabinet, as well as other administrations, and potentially the Biden-era secrecy. These documents certainly did not come out.
I had a falling out with him a long time ago. I don't think I've spoken to him for 15 years. I wasn't a fan. I was not, a long time ago. I'd say maybe 15 years. I was not a fan of his. That I can tell you. I was not a fan of his.
Except when I was. Hi again, everybody. It's 5 o'clock in New York. From, quote, terrific guy to, quote, not a fan, Donald Trump has had every answer when asked about his relationship with the deceased sex offender, Jeffrey Epstein. Now, on the eve of the deadline for the Justice Department to release the Epstein files in their entirety, the New York Times is out with some extraordinary, brand new, exhaustive reporting that could just be the tip of the iceberg on describing the relationship between Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump. The reporting is based on more than 30 interviews with Epstein's employees, survivors, and people who have crossed paths with the two men. From that report, quote, over the years, Mr. Epstein or his partner, Ghislaine Maxwell, introduced at least 6 women who have accused them of grooming or abuse to Mr. Trump, according to interviews, court testimony, and other records. One was a minor at the time. None have accused Mr. Trump himself of inappropriate behavior. One of the women, who has never before spoken publicly about the experience, told the New York Times that Mr. Epstein had coerced her into attending 4 parties at Mr. Epstein's home. Mr. Trump attended all 4, the woman said. At 2 of them, she said Mr. Epstein directed her to have sex with other male guests. The New York Times notes that they have found no evidence implicating Trump in Epstein's abuse and trafficking of minors, but that the two men's relationship was far closer and more complex than Trump has admitted. According to that new reporting, the two bonded over the fact that, quote, neither man drank or did drugs. They pursued women in a game of ego and dominance. Female bodies were currency, end quote. And on their pursuit of women, one woman telling the New York Times this, quote, I just think it was trophy hunting. While Trump can claim to somehow forget or rebrand his friendship with Epstein or his attendance at those 4 parties of Jeffrey Epstein's, women do not forget him. Quote, one woman, then a model and college student in her early 20s living in Manhattan, said she attended 4 parties at the mansion. She cannot recall the names of most of the men she met at the gatherings, not even those Mr. Epstein directed her to, quote, take care of at 2 of them. Recruited by Ms. Maxwell and then abused by Mr. Epstein, she buried her shame and kept their secrets for years. But Mr. Trump's presence stood out, she told the Times. He was a household name, someone Mr. Epstein often bragged about to the women around him, yet also seemed to compete with. Quote, it was like a pissing contest. Who had the most women, she recalled. She spoke anonymously to describe her experiences in detail, saying she feared for her family's safety after Mr. Trump said some of his critics could be executed for sedition. New information about the bond between Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump under scrutiny ahead of the release of the Epstein files is where we start the hour. Some of our favorite reporters and friends. New York Times reporter Nick Confessori is here. He's bylined on that stunning new piece of reporting we just read from. He's also a political analyst for our network. Also joining us, Tara Palmieri. She writes The Red Letter on Substack. She has hosted 2 acclaimed podcast series on the Epstein case. They are called Broken, Jeffrey Epstein, and Power, the Maxwells. Harry Litman is here. He's the former Deputy Attorney General and former U.S. Attorney. He is the host of the Talking Feds podcast.